back, everybody. So, did you enjoy your lunch? Me too. Too short. I wanted to eat more ice cream. Life is sad. Okay, to start out, I just wanted to show you what an official debating ballot looks like. So, if there are judges, after they have a discussion of the debate, this is what they have to do. So they write the name of the team, like ESS1, and then the names of the speakers, Keita and Kodai? Yes. And then give points, and sum the points for the team, and then the ranking. So if that team, like in our discussion, if we all ended up voting in favor of my opinion and this team got first place, then they would have to have the highest total points. And we'd circle number 1 for first place. And if opening opposition got second place, then they would have second highest number of points total, and then circle the second, and so on. So that's what then gets reported. In a tournament, you have several rounds, and then at the end of the several rounds, you have a team with, maybe if it's 5 rounds, you have a team with 5 wins, or with, in this case, 3 times 5, 15 points. Oh, no, sorry, yeah, 3 points. First position is 3 points. So 15 points, that would be the top team. And maybe if you have 8 teams going into the semifinals, you have, team 1, team 8, team 4, team 5, all together in one room debating. And in another room, you have team 2, team 7, team 3, and team 6, all debating. So it ends up being important. All of you tomorrow afternoon, you will debate. So all of you except I and a couple of my day members and Professor Inoue, we will be judging probably. But most of you will be debating. So what you just saw the demonstration debaters do, try to think, try to remember, what should I do? What can I do even better than they did? Or what can I do to be just as powerful? So I'm going to go back to part of my first lecture, because we skipped past some of it very quickly. Yeah. Okay, I guess I can go through this. Well, that's not really that important, actually, as a slide. The part about role fulfillment. Yeah. There we go. So from my first lecture, we were going through very quickly here, but now that you've seen the debate, this should make more sense. So if we look at what happened in our demonstration, role of the opening government. So did they set a context for the debate and define the motion? Yes or no? Everybody all together. So let's look and read. So role of the opening government, first point. All together read. Go.
Set the context for debate and define the motion.
So did the opening government team do that?
Yes.
Yes. What's the context? Lack of helpers. Lonely old people. Yeah. Did they define the motion? Japan?
Money.
Yeah, money. 30,000 yen every month for families who take care of their parents at home. Okay. Sorry?
60 years.
Oh, right. And for anyone, their parents would have to be 60 years old or older. Right. So yeah, they had a definition. Did they make constructive arguments? Yes? What's their first argument? Right? Second argument? Problems of nursing facilities. Third argument? Yeah, relationships in the family. So yeah, they had good arguments. Did they rebut arguments by the opposition team? The first speaker can't do that, obviously, because there is no opposition speech. How about the second speaker? Did he rebut arguments from the opposition team? Sort of. Maybe he was a little bit weak on doing some of the rebuttals, I think. He defended his own side, though. He rebutted, like, they claim that you shouldn't force people. And he said, oh, but it's an incentive. We don't always force them. Sometimes if they don't want to live with their family, they can live on their own, but they just don't get the money. So he did rebut a little bit like that by defending his plan. So I think that's okay. Yeah. This part didn't happen, actually, right? Closing government, I don't think was able to make any POIs in the first two speeches from opposition. But if you imagine, suppose the leader of opposition, Jinsu, is here and she's talking about why independence is very important and there are many old people who are very able to take care of themselves, they're healthy, so they don't need to spend time with their family. Maybe they don't want to spend time with their family, they'd rather be independent. Closing government. They were trying to ask POIs, I think, a little bit. They didn't get taken. I didn't notice, actually, because Rihan was very quiet, but she was trying to ask a POI. So suppose closing government succeeds in asking her POI. Suppose she asks, but are you trying to tell us that the family is not an important part of society? Jinsu would then answer, no, families are important, of course, but we don't think family is the only thing. Like, your family is not your whole identity. It's not like the medieval times when every child who was a farmer, if the parents were farmers, the child had to be a farmer. And if the parent was a noble person, the child became a noble person. Like, people have individual identities in today's society, right? So we don't think that's so important. But then, Kodai could be thinking, now I know what closing government's argument is going to be. They're going to talk about the value of the family. So he could steal that argument. He could say, in fact, you did say, right? You were talking about family relationships, understanding. You could expand your argument and you could say, in fact, one other additional argument is that these days the value of the family is not held important enough. Families are very important to our society for many reasons. If we raise children in families, children are more psychologically stable, they behave better in school, they learn faster. If you have close connections with your family members, you learn how to share your space, you learn how to cooperate, you learn how to discuss things. The family is like a mini unit of society. That's why societies must support families. If we have families disappear, societies will also be harmed. But what opening opposition is proposing is a huge problem. Their idea that we don't have enough independence, that the problem is old people aren't independent enough, this is terrible because it's sending the wrong message to our society. It's saying you don't need your family and your family doesn't need you. Listen to them. They say it's a burden, that these old people are a burden to the family. What a horrible thing to say. What, so your grandmother, she comes home and all she does is sit in the house and like eat all the cookies and ice cream and doesn't help anybody? Never. We think old people are an advantage to the family. That when the children come home from school and their parents are working, if the child had a bad day at school and a bully beat him up, he can talk to his grandmother and it can help solve problems. That's why the government should promote families. The value of the family is too low these days. So our plan has an extra advantage. Its main advantage is that it helps old people, but it also helps families as well. That's why we should win this debate. So that's what it means by stealing the arguments of closing government. If you hear them make a POI, and you think, I could add that to the extra argument for our team, take it, use it, make it a good argument. Then they can't use it later. They have to come up with a new argument, right? Remember, you have to beat your own side as well as just beating the other side. So that's what this means, stealing the arguments. Okay? And finally, everybody together read, go.
Stay
Okay, did they do that? Did opening government do this? Yes? No? Yes. Okay. At least I remember asking one POI for sure. I forget who. I think Keita asked the POI. So at least they did one. Maybe you should have been a little more active, though, right? I think especially during the member speech, I don't think you guys asked POIs. I think you did ask POIs during the whip speech for opposition. But try to be active. Remember, you're the first team to debate, but you're the first team finished. So that means people could forget you. Maybe that happened, right? I'm the only one who voted for you. Well, you voted for yourself, and I voted for you as number one. But most people voted for opposition team, not you, right? So maybe you weren't memorable enough. In fact, that's what I would say for opening government. Your biggest weakness in the debate is maybe you didn't sound strong enough. You spoke very quietly and softly, and you just seemed, sort of calm, and that's okay. But sometimes you want people to remember you, especially in British parliamentary. So try to be maybe more active. Ask more POIs. I think that would be good. Okay. Okay. Any questions about these? Now this is what opening government should try to do. All right. Opening opposition. First, let's read together. Go. Okay. Which one did they do? You guys weren't listening, or you forgot. No, they didn't accept. They accepted, oh yes, there are many old people who are lonely and need the help of their families. Yes? No. They recontextualized. They said, no, the problem is not that there are lonely old people. We do have a problem. There are more old people. Yes. We do have a problem that there are not as many people to help. Yes. But this is a big social-wide problem. It's got, because there's low birth rate, because there's so many different causes. I was actually a little confused about your focus. I told them they should be focused more because they mentioned so many things about the situation now. I was like, okay, but exactly why are you against them? That's what I really wanted to know. What do you disagree with mainly? But I was a little confused. But they were recontextualizing. They were trying to say, no, it's different. That the problem is actually that we can't let the old people be independent enough. They should be more independent. So I think they didn't accept the context. So that's a clash, right? What is the fundamental problem? That's a clash in the debate. It wasn't such an important clash because it was a little unclear. The two important clashes were the two clearest clashes in the debate. And we have to thank closing government, partly, for making this clash, virtue of family versus virtue of independence, a more clear clash in the debate. Okay, second. Go. So which one did they do? Accept, right. Yeah, definitional challenge is something very, very rare. And I won't even mention it in the future because it almost never happens and shouldn't happen. If there's a really bad definition that you cannot debate, like the one about medical drugs means drugs for adults that are tested, that are sold in pharmacies with a prescription. If you just can't debate it at all, then you can challenge. You can say that's not a fair definition. We think legalizing drugs means we'll try to keep most of their definition, but we're going to say you have to argue in favor of legalizing untested drugs, not drugs that have been already tested and proven to be totally safe. But we don't think that's a good idea, or something like that. You can give a replacement definition if the definition is really so unfair. But in this case, it was okay, so they accepted it. All right, how about third? Read together. Go. Right. So what about this idea that families are going to be bad at taking care of the children or the parents? Did they concede or rebut? They rebutted, right? They say, no, families are good. They understand the people better than the professionals, even though the professionals... What about the idea that we need more independence and that the money would be better if we just gave it directly to the old people? Actually, didn't rebut specifically. So it might have rebutted a little more strongly on that point. But they rebutted. So they did that, partly at least. Okay, how about third one? Oh, wait, I'm talking, we're at opening opposition now. Sorry, I'm thinking about the wrong side. Did they concede or rebut that families would be good at taking care of the parents? Rebutted, right? They said professionals would be better, etc. So they rebutted. You guys did a pretty good job of engaging, I think. Sorry. Third, go. So did opening opposition make constructive arguments? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes. What were they?
This current is good.
Current system is good. But then they said, we have a different plan, right? So that was a little confusing, right? They did make some constructive arguments. They made, basically, I think, when they talked about the context, when they talked about the fundamental problem, it was talking about the context, but it was also an argument of their own, a constructive argument about independence. They also made an argument, I think, about a counter plan. Like instead of having the families take care, we will pay money directly, expand the pension system, right? That was their counter plan. So it was a little hard, though, to find their focus. That was their weak point in opening opposition. Their constructive arguments didn't stand out strongly as separate, clear arguments. In fact, as you said, the first thing they said is, we think the current system is fine. But then they said, but we have another plan, right? So the way they presented it was very confusing in some ways. But they did have their arguments. Okay, third. Or not third, but fourth, fifth? I can't count. Sorry. Let's read together. Ready? Go. Okay. So did they do that or not? Yes, no? Did they steal any argument from the closing half team?
Maybe no.
No, right, no. Closing half team had an argument about why the facility, the old age facility, works well. But they didn't give a POI, right? And in fact, the closing team's argument was fairly limited. It was a small argument. It was part of what opening team was saying anyway. So there wasn't really anything to steal, I think, in this case. But it's the same concept. If the closing team asks a point of information to the government team, something totally new, and then the opening team hears that, and then they still have a speech left, they can steal the argument and make it in their speech. So that's possible. Okay, and did they? Last one, go. So did they do that? Opening? Yes, I think they did. Although, again, you guys could have probably been a little more active, I think. But starting with, did you ask in the Prime Minister's speech at all? Or did you ask in closing half at all? I think I remember specifically like Kenji in the closing opposition was asking a lot of POIs. Opening half, I think you got more active after. Yeah, I think you did. So let's see. Yeah, you did. You asked one in the member of opposition speech and one in the whip speech. Good. So Jinsu did. Hae-young, you didn't ask POIs, did you?
We helped.
You helped. You worked together on them. Okay. So you could have been a little more active maybe, but not bad. Okay. Next one, closing government. So, first point, go. So, did they do that? I think so, yes. They tried to anyway. Prime Minister's speech, nobody took POIs. Kenji was very active in the Prime Minister's speech. When Keita was giving his speech, Kenji was asking POIs actively. Rihan, you said you stood up, or you were trying to, but I didn't even notice. So they were too passive. They should have been more loud, like Kenji did. Stand up. Point of information. Let people know, right? The speaker is probably very busy speaking, and if you're over here, the speaker maybe doesn't see you. So you should say something. If the speaker is not looking and not taking your point, say something. POI, point of information. Sir, on that point. Something like that. Okay. Number 2.
Summarize and characterize the outcome of the debate.
Right. So how about in member of government speech? Did he do that? Oh, she, sorry. Did she do that? Ridihan, sorry. I'm getting confused about who was on which team anymore. Did Rihan summarize and clarify or characterize the debate? Yes, I think she did that very well. She had a nice opening, in fact. It said, opening opposition agrees there's a problem, but wants more independence. And the question then is like who, she identified the first clash. The first question is who will take better care of the elderly people. And then she says, but there's another really important clash, which is like, what is it that my notes don't say exactly. Anyway, but she identified and said the important thing is who has the better vision for society or something like that. I don't remember exactly how she said it. But that was very good because she sort of summarized and organized everything so far. And that's exactly how you should begin a second half speech. Okay. So second or third point. Go. Right. Okay. Did she do that? Well, in the member speech, she could only rebut opening. So did she rebut? I think she did. She had rebuttals, although she changed in her rebuttal sort of to her own constructive, but she did rebut. Okay. And did the whip speaker, did Minjung also rebut? Yeah, she talked about how important is independence and so on, right? And she defended the plan. So I think that's good. Fourth, be consistent with the opening government. Knifing hurts you more than them. So did closing government's ideas match opening government's ideas? Similar or different? I think similar. They both talked about family. Opening government also talked about family. Closing government extended by specifically saying the value of family is an important value the government should support. And did they offer an extension? Again, yes. Virtue of the family. Finally, did the whip sum up the whole debate, emphasizing her team's contribution? I don't know. I think she mainly more did rebuttal in summary. If you summarize the whole debate, what she should have done is said something like this. These were the clashes in the debate. This is why, probably starting with this is the most important one. And then going to these ones are more, well, fundamental problem. These two are what we call principle clashes. Ideals, values, principles. These two are what we call practical clashes. So probably starting, especially because it's her team's extension, starting with this, and then going to this, and then finally in the very end going back to this and emphasizing. So the reason why this debate has been conclusively won for the government bench by closing government is that we've identified the most important principle. We're not debating about the individual choice of every person to either be independent or be with the family. The opening government's plan gave some flexibility. We are debating about what the government of Japan has a financial and a social duty to support. And that is to support families. That's why we're giving 30,000 yen extra every month to families that take care of their parents in the family. We've shown you that it's a better way. We've shown you that it's more practically effective. But more important, what is the government's morality? As my member speaker told you, the most important idea is to shore up the fundamental of society in every way. And that starts with the family, the small unit of society, right? So that's how she could end. That's why government bench clearly wins this debate. That's why you should vote for the closing government as your number one team in this debate. So I think in terms of summary, I think her speech was a little more just sort of going from point to point rather than having a clear flow and organization. That's something a whip speaker should do, is try and organize as clearly as possible. Really show your team's vision. In fact, every team in the debate, your main goal is sort of to convince the judges of your team's vision in the debate. Why it's the best, clearest, most important vision for what we really want in this world. Okay, last, closing opposition. So, did they ask POIs? Obviously, yes, especially Kenji. Although, after the first couple speeches, you got a little more quiet. Maybe because you were planning for your own speech. I don't know. But anyway, they definitely were quite active. Sum up and characterize the debate. So, in his speech, did Tomohiro, sorry. Did Tomohiro summarize? He did a little bit, I think, although it was a very short summary. You just said the main issue is, are we arguing in favor of independence or dependence? But then I think you just jumped from that into a rebuttal about lack of helpers. So I don't think you maybe summarized as much as you should have at the beginning of your speech. That's another trick to making a good speech, is people usually jump too quickly into specific details at the beginning. But I think it's good to spend like at least a minute sort of giving an overview a lot of the time for every speaker. Try to clarify, try to say, well, what are going to be the most important parts of my speech? Tell them, actually. The main clash is independence and dependence. So here in closing opposition, we are going to show you why the current model of independence can be improved greatly. With the same amount of money that they're going to use to support the family, we can do a lot better job if we just support the facilities for taking care of older people. And that is our extension in this debate. We are going to be the most practical team in this whole room by showing you very specifically how facilities to care for the elderly are better in every way than families, right? So if you give that sort of a longer introduction about what you're trying to accomplish in your speech and what your team is trying to accomplish, that can make you a little more effective, okay? Okay, so rebut opening government and closing government arguments. Did they do that? Yes? No? What do you think? Did you guys do that in your debate or in your speeches? I think they did some, yeah. I think they talked about the family virtue or virtue of family, and then they sort of said, no, but it's a burden. I don't know if you really rebutted on a principle level, and I think you were a little bit abstract in your rebuttal, though, but it was not bad. Okay, consistent with the opening opposition. Yes, in fact, too consistent. It just sounded like they were talking about one little piece of opening opposition. That was their biggest mistake. They didn't show me clearly what's their own unique vision, why their argument is special. Opening already mentioned like facilities to care for the elderly people, right? So why are you doing something so different or better? But you were consistent for sure. You didn't contradict anything they said, so that was good. Offer an extension. That's your weak point. Your extension wasn't really a lot different. It didn't make a huge impact on the debate. And sum up the whole debate, emphasizing your team's contributions again. I think I told Kenji already, just like with government whip, with Minjung's speech, Kenji also probably should have organized a little better. But in his case, he wants to emphasize this part, the practical part, because that's his team's organization and that's his team's extension, is about the practical side, about the nursing home, the facility, right? So he wants to go through this part in principle a little bit less. If you spend too much time on this, you're helping your opening team beat you, because that was their part, the principle of independence, right? But if you go through this fairly quickly and just say, well, you know, it's hard to argue about principles. Like, sure, families are important. Who could deny that? But also independence is a very important value now. And we think opening opposition was a little more specific about why older people want to be independent. So we think we won that clash. But then you stop. Don't say a lot more. If you keep saying how good opening opposition was, then they beat you, right? So then go to But the real reason why we should win this debate is the practical side, because the biggest clash in the debate is who should care better for the elderly. And in closing opposition, we showed you for sure that it's going to be a nursing home. We showed you financially, and we showed you professionally, and we showed you that the government has more direct power to operate them, and all those kinds of things. So that's where they should have done in their summary. So again, I think the whip speakers in both sides sort of failed to convince me that their team really had a clear way of balancing the debate one way or another, because they didn't organize enough. You just talked about this point and that point. You did a lot of this, but not enough of this in the whip speeches. All right. That pretty much takes us to the end of the first lecture. And so we're ready to do the second one. And you guys all seem a little bit sleepy after lunch. So that's okay, because I'm going to make you do some work in just a minute. And then you have to get up and talk with a partner and give speeches. Okay, I think I'm going to skip to the middle part of the lecture about points of information. So you don't actually have to look at the lecture notes. There we go. This one is, let's take a brief break to talk about POIs. But instead of a brief break, it's going to be the first part. All right. So, 3 kinds of POIs. Let's read about them all together. Are you ready? Okay, go. First, clarification. Are you setting this motion in Japan? How exactly are you defining support? Rebuttal or new line of attack? Can you give us an example of one case where that really happened? Like, I think opposition was mentioning, like, why are families bad at taking care of parents? Like, because they can abuse their parents. Like, okay, but that's very rare. Can you think of one specific case? I mean, I know it happens, true, but how often, right? Or your plan ignores the issue of poverty, something like that. What about poor families, even with the subsidy? Can they still take care of their parents? Is it enough? Maybe. Okay, ways of asking points of information. First, POI. Or point, sir, if it's a man. I guess you can say anything else you want. Hey! It sounds a little funny, but it's possible. Okay? Accepting or rejecting?
Okay, what's your point? No thank you. Sit down. Later.
Okay, so that's the basics of points of information. You saw some examples, points of information. Now let's do sort of an exercise. So it's a new motion to wake you up and make you start thinking. This is actually the motion for the International Friendship Debate last year. If you saw that debate, maybe you know all the answers. Maybe not, I don't know. Okay, let's read the motion. Go. This. Okay, foreign workers the right to vote. Okay, and the Prime Minister says,
There are more and more foreign workers these days, but there is a problem because they are not treated well. We think giving foreign workers the right to vote will help us.
okay, so far so good. That's context, reason for supporting the motion. I think that was Kota who gave that speech. Is that right? Prime Minister for foreign workers the right to vote? Oh, were you deputy? Or a member, all right, second speaker. So it was Tsubasa? Maybe Tsubasa gave that one. Okay, anyway. So following that,
Our definition is that they can hold in all elections, including the presidential election.
and then he's going to give the argument. So the question is, this is what you should talk with your partner about. If you are opposition, what do you want to know about this definition? Write a POI to ask. Okay? So with your partner, talk a little bit, try and figure out what is a point of information you can ask about the definition. Kota, you're going to be going to buy refreshments soon, right? Or sometime. So Yohei? Yohei, why don't you move up here and work with Kodai? So you and he can be partners, and then you and Professor Inoue can just freely leave whenever you feel like. I think, oh wait, you don't have a partner either, do you? Oh wait, do we have anybody else who doesn't have a partner? Yes. Who was your partner last time? Oh, you were partner with.
Yeah.
Oh, with Shin. Okay. Well, you could get a new partner, or somebody could get a new partner. I already moved Yohei up here, so. You want a new partner? You guys can be the same, but what's your name?
Taishi.
Taishi? Okay, excellent. You guys can be partners. Okay, good. All right, so you guys can be partners then. All right, talk with your partner about how to write a point of information. What do you want to know? The Prime Minister says there are more and more foreign workers, but there's a problem. They're not treated well. There's an opposition. If you're in opposition, what do you want to know about this definition? Okay, everybody stop. All right, so I'm the Prime Minister. Our definition is that they can vote in all elections, including the presidential election. We have 3 arguments. Yes, sir.
Where country?
Could you hear Ryo's point of information?
Which
Oh, you did hear him. Good. Okay. Yeah. His question. Oh, thank you very much. Right. Our definition, this is set in Japan. We're going to say the Japanese government should give foreign workers the right to vote in all elections. Before I go on, any more points? Yes, sir. What's your point?
What is the definition of the foreign worker, for example?
Oh, sit down. That's a silly question. A foreign worker is someone who's not a Japanese citizen but's working in Japan, of course. Okay, go ahead. One more.
How about foreigners who come to Japan for the business trip?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, what we mean is someone with a working visa rather than someone who's temporarily in Japan, like doing some work. Okay? Those are examples of good points of information. The first time he asked it, it didn't sound like a good point. But the second time he asked it, it was much clearer and better. So yeah, do you mean all, like, if they're just here on a business trip temporarily and there's an election that day, they can walk into a voting place and vote? No, right? So remember I said in the morning, language is never 100% clear. And if you have a question, if you're debating and you don't understand something about the definition, or you think that there's, a very important point that you need to ask, you should ask. So yes, sir, what's your point?
This says that there is a problem, but I don't know what is a problem. So.
Well, okay. I'm going to go into that a little bit more in my first argument. But to quickly answer your question, we have situations where, for example, nurses in Japan are allowed to work 3 years, and then they have to actually leave the country, go back to their home country, and reapply for work as if they were never even here if they want to even continue and stay in their job, which means there are huge disruptions in the hospitals and places they work, and it means they have a huge personal burden where they have to give up their job. These kinds of things are just not being addressed by the Japanese legislature, but we think if we gave foreign workers the right to vote, their vote would mean that people would pay much more serious attention to these problems. Therefore, we are proposing this motion. Thank you for your question. Any other points? Okay, so that's what points of information are all about. Very important, though. The first type of point is clarification. Are you setting this motion in Japan? That would be my first question. Or where? What country? As Ryo asked, right? That's a very important point to ask if it's unclear. Because situation in Japan for foreign workers is probably very different than the situation like in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, who are the foreign workers? It's not like nurses or cleaning ladies or nannies for children, right, in Bangladesh. Who are foreign workers in Bangladesh? Business, like big business people, factory owners, white-collar workers, maybe aid workers or university instructors like that, right? So it could be a very different group of workers that you're talking about, depending on the setting, right? Now, it could be, the answer could be, no, not Japan, where we mean everywhere. We think it's a fundamental right. If you're part of a society, you're earning money, and you're paying taxes, you have a fundamental right to also vote for the leaders who are affecting your daily life. So we mean everywhere in the world. It doesn't matter whether they're foreign workers in Japan or in Korea or Bangladesh or the United States, everywhere. So that's a possible answer. Government team needs to think about that and decide when they're making their definition. Should we talk about Japan specifically? Should we talk more generally about the whole world? Should we talk about the United States? Or should we talk about some specific area like foreign workers in the Middle East or something like that, right? So second clarification point. This is not one, it's sort of like Kenji's point though. About business, you mean what about people on short business trips? So let's read together. Are you ready? Go. Will you give this right to all workers? No qualifications. So you can think about that in Japan, foreign workers. Should workers who have very low education be allowed to vote? Should workers who cannot speak Japanese be allowed to vote? Should workers who have been in the country for only 2 days be allowed to vote? Even if they do have a work visa, but they're only here 2 days in Japan, should they be allowed to vote? Again, government teams should think about things like that. So when you're giving your definition, going back one slide, this is probably not enough of a definition. It's a little too unclear. At least you should say where. And maybe you want to say more specifically, like with no conditions, we mean every worker. Or we mean workers with a working visa. Or we will allow workers to vote, but we have one condition. They have to have lived in Japan for at least 6 months before the election. Something like that, right? A little more detail in the definition might be helpful. Okay, so more ways to ask. If you're asking a clarification point, the ones in yellow, go. Right. If you say something like that, the other team should really take your point because it will help them also. If the definition is more clear, everybody understands the debate better. And that means the whole debate is better, more exciting, more specific. So, and same thing. I guess I added a couple of additional ways. Like you can say, all of you sit down. If there are 3 people asking points of information at the same time, it can happen, right? All of you sit down. Or I'll take the deputy leader. Or stay standing out. Yeah, okay. So those are the same. Okay. So, continuing, another exercise. Ready? So motion, this house. Same motion. Leader of opposition says. Because they will just leave the country soon. Okay. Question, or not question, well, question and assignment. If you are government, what could you say to challenge this argument? Right? A rebuttal point of information. So go ahead. Right now with your partner, talk about it a little bit. Write a point of information to challenge or rebut that argument from leader of opposition. Okay, in 30 seconds, I'm going to ask for a volunteer to come up and be the leader of opposition and say that, and then we all get to ask POIs. So if you want to volunteer, you have now 15 seconds to decide. I want to volunteer to be the leader of opposition and answer POIs about this. Okay, who wants to be leader of opposition? Is that a volunteer? I knew you'd volunteer. Good. I'm sure you'll do an excellent job. He's the most enthusiastic debater I have met in a long time. So, sorry? Yeah, so you just read the script, and then we all can ask points of information to Kenji. Okay, so everybody get ready. All right, go.
Foreign workers don't have an incentive to elect good leaders because they will just leave the country soon. Even if, okay, sir.
Do you think the foreign worker who stay in Japan forever like smallest? Do you think? How do you think? The foreign worker who stay outside, there are almost all foreign workers stay in Japan nearly forever, like small wrestler.
But at least they left their motherland, right? At least. Even if they want to elect a good leader, they won't be able to because they don't know about our country.
Okay, everybody, points of information. Sir. So you are trying to tell me that if you go visit another country, even for a short time as a tourist, you know absolutely nothing about the country you're going to? Is that what you're claiming?
At least they never lived such a country, so.
Shame. Go ahead. Other people, ask points of information. You have a good one, right? Hanae? Go ahead, Hanae. Go ahead. Stand up.
At first, the workers was going to stay in Japan for a short time, but they will want to stay longer, and so.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I understand.
Thank you.
Even they stay in Japan longer, at least they are grown up in the foreign society. So we say that Japanese people know better about Japanese society because they brought up in Japanese society.
Here, here. That was a better answer than.
I think those who will leave the country soon maybe won't go to elections. What do you think? I think those who will leave the country soon won't go to elections because they have few interests in Japan's election. What do you think?
Here, here.
Maybe it is true, but we don't think that all majority of foreign workers will. Sorry. How can I say? Sorry. Please.
I think those who will leave the country soon maybe won't go to elections because they don't have much interest in Japan's society or elections. So what do you think about this?
Yeah. I think probably a better way, that's a good point. A better way to explain that point is people who have no interest or who will leave the country anyway won't vote. So it's not a problem. The only ones who will vote are the ones who stay in the country or do have interest. So it's not a problem. That's the point. How do you answer? Can you answer? Or, oh, sorry, I lose the argument. Maybe. That's a good point of information, though. Any other ones? Any different ones? Yeah.
There's many people in Japan who live in Japan since they are born, but they don't have any interest in politics. So many people don't vote, even they are Japanese. So it doesn't mean you stay longer, you know politics.
Here, here. Excellent point. Can you answer that one? Sweat. Okay, all right, thank you. These two examples, Ryo's example, Yui's example, they demonstrate the power of a good point of information. If you have a good point and if you explain it clearly, then the speaker sometimes maybe even has no answer. Now, he didn't have a chance to prepare, right? Like Kenji did not have a chance to prepare this motion. He didn't think about it deeply. So it's okay that he can't answer. But those are they're good points of information. It's very important. The last thing you said, Yui, you made the connection to this argument. In your point of information, you started with a detail. You said, many people in Japan, even if they were born in Japan, don't know a lot about the election and don't vote. But then you made the connection. You say, so, amount of time that you've been in the country is not connected to how much you know. That's very important to make a connection to the argument when you're asking the point of information. So that was good, though. The end part especially was really good. And then, yes, then the leader of opposition would have to come up with some justification for still excluding foreign workers. Anybody who could answer that for the leader of opposition? Can you think of a good answer now that you're not standing up here with everybody's eyes on you? I would probably say, well, that's a very good point, but we have to make our decision based on the majority. And if you look at the big number of people, generally people who have been here longer or people who were born knowing Japanese from birth, they will know more than generally the other group who don't know. So in order to avoid bad effects on elections, sometimes you can't look at every individual case. We don't want to test everybody about their knowledge of Japanese politics, but we think in general Japanese citizens will make better decisions and understand more. We think it's a very reasonable condition. That's okay, right? That's an answer. It's not a perfect answer, though. You still have very good arguments to make. I think if you combine it with Ryo's point about, well, but some people, if they don't care, they don't vote. So it's not a problem. The ones who do vote, they vote because they do care. You combine those two arguments, and you have really, really strong argument for the government side in this debate, right? Okay, so, right. This is a different one that I thought of, but it's, similar. Like rebuttal. Why won't the foreign workers want a good leader while they're here? Or, this is possible in some cases. Let's read this together. Are you ready? Go. Your argument ignores our definition. We said we would only give the right to vote for workers who have been in the country at least 1 year. So if your definition said that, right, then if they ask the POI, then the leader of opposition says, then the leader of opposition says this, but then POI, you ignore our definition. Our definition said we only allow them to vote if they've been here 1 year, so your argument doesn't make sense. That could be a POI. Your POI does not have to be a question, right? It can just be a statement. That's fine. So, okay. So here's an example of the third kind. New line of attack. This is it's like a totally new point you're bringing in your point of information. Let's read together. Are you ready? Go. we believe people who pay taxes should also get representation in government. Why shouldn't they? So that's not about the same point. It's about a different point. But you can ask that as a point of information. This is the kind of POI, if closing half asks this POI, maybe that's going to be their extension. So opening half, if you hear them ask it, and then the other team answers it, and then you go, deputy goes up and says, and another reason why we support right to vote for foreign workers is the idea of representation. As the point of information said, representation is generally considered to be something you deserve if you take part in society and you participate in all your duties to society. So foreign workers, do they obey the law? Do they pay their taxes? Do they behave, reasonably and normally in public? Yes. The answer to all of those is yes. Of course, criminals can't vote. That's already part of the law. If you're in jail, you can't vote. Of course, people who don't pay taxes, those people are criminals. We can put them in jail or we can send them back to their country so they don't vote. But the people who pay taxes and criminals have a right to representation. It's because they're making their contribution, society owes them something in return. So you can actually steal that argument if it's POI'd by an earlier person. Or you can make it a POI yourself if you think of it and if you want to challenge the other team. So anyway. Questions? First question, go. How many POIs should you take during your speech? What do you think is a good answer? People who already know don't answer. Debaters, like experienced debaters. People who are totally new, like Yuichi and Shiro and, sorry, what's your name? Cho and Yui and what's your name? And Hanai in front of Hanai. What's your name? Hanai in front of Hanai. Nene, like you guys, people who never debated before. And did you debate before? Next to Yojin. What's your name? Ryuto, like Ryuto. You guys, okay. How many do you think? How many POIs should you take when you're speaking and the other teams are asking? What's a good answer? What do you think? Yeah. What's your name again? Wait, you're ESS member, right? Genji, right. But you have experience debating, don't you? Yeah, so don't you answer. How about your partner? You're also Yuichi? Have you debated before? Never. Okay, what do you think? How many should you take? 3. Okay. So how many do you think? 1. Okay. Nene, how many do you think? 1. Okay, those are both reasonable answers. The ideal is supposedly 2. Take 1 from the opening half, 1 from the closing half. But 1 is okay, 3 is okay. Why not 5? Why not? Oh, it's just like a fight. It's like, yeah, you said this. No, but we said that. No, we said this. Gets totally confusing, right? Part of your job as a speaker is to organize things so the judges follow your team's ideas. So you don't want to take 5 or even 4. 3 is a maximum. Why not 0? Why is 0 not a good idea, Cho? Exactly. Both of those things are both true. It's not polite. It makes you look like you're too defensive and worried about the other team. And you lose a chance to listen to their ideas and to maybe get some extra ideas yourself. So good. So 1 to 3. 2 is best, usually. 1 from each half of the other side. Okay. Second part of the question. Go.
How many POIs should you ask during your speech?
That means like somebody else's speech. If you're sitting down waiting for your turn, how many POIs should you try to ask? How many times should you stand up or say POI? Nene, what's your partner's name? Kako, what do you think? How many? Two, okay. Shiro, what do you think? One or two? Okay, so what's your partner's name? Is she asleep? Okay, never mind, let her sleep. Let her sleep. Yui, how many do you think? Two? Yuichi? No, what's your name? Mr. Inoue. Yohei, how many do you think? Should you ask during somebody else's speech? 5. That's a good answer. 5 is maybe a lot, but 3 or 4 at least. Because you don't know. Will they take you, or will they say no thank you, or no sit down, or something, right? So try 4, maybe 5 even is okay. 4 people, 5 times each, that's 20 times, right? So usually you just say like this. You don't even have to say something. If you're a speaker and you don't want to take the POI, you just go like this. It means sit down. Sometimes the people even make a joke. Like there was one debate, the other team was always constantly bumping up POI, POI, POI. The speaker was going like this. Finally, she looked at them. She said, "Girls, you've been debating long enough. You know this means sit down." And then she kept going, right? That's good. Okay, so you take 2, but you try to offer several because you never know, right? It's a chance. It makes it a better debate again. Like Cho said, right? You have a chance to find some new idea or to express your idea better or to defeat the other team. It increases engagement. It means all the teams are fighting with each other harder. So it makes it a more exciting and better debate if there's a lot of POIs. Okay. And I think that, right, so now we have an activity. POI exercise. Let's read the directions. Are you ready? Go. 1. Oh, wait, we have to stop right now because we don't have groups. We just have partners. So I'm going to make groups now. All right, so let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is one group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Kota 6. This is one group. If you guys leave early, it's a smaller group of just 4, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is one group. 4, 6, one group here. Okay. 2, 4. Okay, 4. 4. This is one group. This is one group, okay? Okay. I'll maybe join your group because if she's still asleep, she's not going to be very active. All right. Okay, so first, again, choose one member of your group to be the speaker. Do that right now. All right, every group have a speaker? Yes? Speakers, raise your hands. How about your group? Hiro and Cho and Kensuke. Oh, and sorry, what's your name again? Naoko? Hinako, you're the speaker. Okay, good. Number 2, go. Wait. Because 3. 4. Right. So turning down actually doesn't help you in this case because if you turn one person down, the next person will just ask a POI and then you have to take them. But that's okay, right? So you're talking and then, so in this group, like, you know, who's the speaker? Rihan's the speaker. So if Minjung asks a POI, she says, okay, what's your POI? Minjung asks, Rihan answers. Then Ryo asks a POI, no thank you. Then Hayato asks a POI, yes, what's your POI? Then Ryo asks another POI, no thank you. Then Jinsu asks a POI, what's your POI? Then Haeyoung asks a POI, no thank you. Then Ryo asks a POI, yes, what's your POI finally? Right, like that. And so even if you only can talk for 1 minute, that's enough, because after that, POI, 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 POI. And then finally, number 5. After Right. So what I'll do is after I say go, the speaker starts speaking, and then 1 minute, that means everybody else POI. That means you guys all need to write down POIs while you're preparing. Or if you think of new ones while the speaker is talking, that's fine. You can ask your new POI. It doesn't matter. Or you can ask, like, can you please explain your definition again? Anything, right? You can ask any POI you want. It's fine. But at 2:30, also 1 tap. And then no more POIs. Then the speaker gets to summarize and end the speech. So the speaker can say, so on the issue of giving foreign workers the right to vote, all those members of the opposition, you are just so anti-foreign, it makes me disgusted. I think this is backward and ancient thinking that we need to change, and that's why we're proud to support the motion, and we think government should win. Something like that, right? That means you have to end your speech. So that's how it's going to work. I'm going to erase some of this stuff. And I'm just going to put a few extra directions here on the board to help you along. So just to outline, the first thing you have to do after you see the motion, decide. Are you want to be government or do you want to be opposition? So that's the first thing. Who's the speaker in this group? All right, Yohei? Yeah, Yuichi. Sorry, you're Yohei. Yohei? Yohei. And you're Yohei also. Yuichi, right. So Yuichi, you decide government or opposition, and you tell your 3 members. And if Yuichi says government, then what side are you, Shiro? If Yuichi says I'm government, then what are you? No, you're opposition. If Yuichi says government, Shiro, you are opposition. How about Yohei? Yohei, which side are you? You're also opposition, right? Okay, and sorry, Genichi, which side are you? You are also opposition. Genichi? Okay, right, all 3 of them opposition. Okay, so then Yuichi will prepare for a prime minister speech, just like in the 1-minute debate. But these 3 people write POIs. So, or just think of arguments and then ask them like POIs. You can write any kind. You can clarify, ask, but is this in Japan? Or, you can make a challenge POI, like a different argument, or you can make a rebuttal POI. Suppose Yuichi decides he's opposition. Then you 3 guys are all government, right? So the speaker can choose. You can choose your side for the speaker, right? For example. Example. Just an example. Okay, any questions about what you need to do? No. Okay, right. Ready for the motion? Yes, everybody? All right. Motion. This house, let's read it together. Go. This house supports the right of individuals to own guns? Okay, so go. 1 minute to prepare. Oh, no, sorry, not 1 minute yet. Speakers, tell your team, tell your group, government or opposition. Okay, everybody stop. That's 1 minute. Very short. And get ready to speak. So speakers all stand up. And turn around so that you're facing your group. Same motion again. New speaker. New speaker, same motion. All right? Choose a new speaker for each group. Each group, new speaker. Okay, everybody has a speaker? All right, speakers, if you want, you can do the same side as before, or you can switch sides, but it doesn't matter. You decide right now. Decide right now, tell your group. Government or opposition? Tell your group. Tell your group. Government or opposition? All right. So speakers, you have 1 more minute to get your speech ready, and then we'll go. 1 minute. Everybody else, more time, think of more POIs. Okay. Preparation time has expired, as they say in Japan. This is Japan. Okay, so speakers, stand up. And we now call the second speaker on This House Supports the Right of Individuals to Own Guns. Go. New motion, last chance. So 1 more time, choose a speaker. Only 1 more person gets to do this, so last chance. Okay, and in this case, I'm going to give extra time, because I know actually 2.5 minutes isn't really enough, especially sometimes it's a little awkward answering. So 1 minute, 10 minutes, no, 1 minute. POIs, 3.5 minutes to no POIs. And then 4 minutes, end. Okay? So 2 taps. All right, ready for the motion? Once more, before we start preparation time, you have to tell your team, tell your group, government or opposition, okay? Okay, so motion is, this house, all together, this house believes teenagers should have access to abortion without their parents' consent. Anybody who has a question about the motion? Abortion? You know abortion? Yes? Without their parents' consent. Even if their parents don't know, a teenager should be able to go to the doctor, get abortion. Okay? That's the motion. Speakers, tell your group, government or opposition. Okay, preparation time has expired. Speakers, stand up. Thank you. So being polite is usually good. In the debate, you fight very hard, but after the debate, you're friends again. It's nice. Also, POIs, points of information, they're very, very, very important in British parliamentary debate. Like I said, after your team finishes, especially if you're in the opening part, your only chance to remind the judges that you're important is to ask the points of information. So especially opening half teams. Closing half also, it's a chance to get actively involved early to show the judge that you're very excited about the debate. So POIs are important. Answering them is important. Knowing when to turn them down is important. Knowing when to take them and so on. It's a little bit of an art. Okay, so now that you're awake, I'm going to put you back to sleep by lecturing a little bit. Back to the lecture. In fact, I think I just need to start and stop the whole show again. So there we go. So, well, starting with the title, Team and Speaker Strategies. In the morning and in the first part of today's afternoon talk, we just were learning what is a debate and what is a British parliamentary debate. Now, this part of the talk is what's the strategy to win the debate. So I said a little bit about that before when I was talking about how each team did in the demonstration. But I'm going to go into more detail now. I'll give you a sample case that shows you how a debate can work in a very effective way. It shows you maybe a little bit more. Actually, maybe I'll skip that because I bring this in again as an exercise. I'll skip the sample case, in fact. I'll just skip by it. But it's going to come up again as an exercise later anyway, so you'll see it then at that point. I'll just go right to strategy, which is how to prepare. First, part of winning is using your preparation time wisely. In British parliamentary, there are only 15 minutes. It's very short. 1 minute, though, in 1 minute you could prepare something. So 15 minutes is not too short, but it's very short. Some other kinds, North American 20 minutes, Asian 30 minutes, and so on. So comparatively, British parliamentary is short, and you have to use your time efficiently. And after I do that, then I'll talk about how to win in each position with more exercises also. So actually, before we even discuss preparation, question. First question, read together. Ready? Go. What special difficulties does each team face in preparation for BP? But also, what special advantages does each team have in BP? So you have difficulties, but you have advantages. You have to know what they are so that you can prepare properly. Go ahead, discuss with your partner or discuss with your whole group. Try to think of some advantages and disadvantages for each team. Difficulties and advantages. Go ahead, discuss now. Okay, everybody stop. All right, so opening government. What's most difficult?
No time.
Right. Short time, much work. You need a definition. You need a setting. You need background, and least amount of time. But what's the advantage?
Define.
Right. So you can define, you can choose your, choose your battle, sort of. But you have less time to prepare because you have to spend time choosing, right? So they reflect each other. How about opening opposition? What's the most difficult thing? Yes, Yui. Right. Yeah. Don't know what definition to plan for. Okay, what's the advantage of opening opposition? Nothing? And we'll leave that blank for a minute, but there are advantages. Closing government. What's the hardest thing? Right, you don't know how to extend. Because you don't know what battle opening government will even choose. What's the advantage of closing government? Okay. Yeah, you can use the opening government ideas. Basically, you have more prep time. Right? While they're talking, you can be preparing still, extra. How about closing opposition? What's the hard part? No choice, right? No choices at all. You have to respond to what the other teams do. What's the good part? The advantage? Yeah, extra time. And there's another one. You get to be the last person in the debate. You get the final comments, right? If there's anything still unclear, if you can clarify it, nobody else can say you're wrong. So I think the very clearest teams with the clearest difference, right, if you think opening government, closing opposition, opening government has the shortest time but the most choice. Closing opposition has the least choice but the most time because you can listen. So it's sort of a balance between time and choice. Opening opposition, any advantage? That's not an advantage. If there's a definition challenge, it ruins the whole debate for everybody because everybody's just confused about what the definition should be. Makes it a very confusing debate. Everybody gets bad points. Even if you're the first place team, you're sort of, well, in Korea we say 아쉬운 느낌, right? 좀 더럽다는 느낌. Like you feel bad. 찝찝하다. So anyway, but what is the advantage for opening up?
Opening opposition has upper hand to engage. Opening and closing.
Right. So one thing about opening opposition is you directly have to relate to both these teams, right? This team, you have your second speaker. Their third speaker is going to be directly rebutting your second speaker, so there's some direct engagement. Same thing here. Closing government is sort of in the middle of the debate, so it's a good position to engage all the teams. So these two teams have that advantage as well for engagement as a plus. More engagement. Opening government is out too soon. It's their biggest disadvantage, actually. Out too soon. You don't even get to listen to the second speech before you go out of the debate, pretty much, right? That's why you really have to ask points of information in opening government. But these two engage the middle of the debate, so that's a little bit better for them. Teams have to deal with them. In fact, closing government has the biggest advantage there. Opening opposition, they get to rebut them directly, but they don't get to answer back, right? And closing, they have to answer. So both the opposition teams, they get to deal with both of them. Closing government's probably the best team for being central in the debate like that. For making sure you can show that you're better than every other team. Any other advantage for opening opposition? Or just think for opposition in general, if you're having an Asian debate or a North American debate. There's another one, a bigger one. You can choose a strategy based on government weakness. Right? You get to listen to the definition, you get to listen to the first speaker, and then you can choose. You don't have to defeat everything in their case. In our sample debate, opening government said, old people are lonely, old people don't get good care. Opening opposition chose to challenge that right from the beginning. They said the context is wrong. Actually, old people mostly are not lonely. They mostly don't need care. They should have more independence. Opening opposition didn't have to do that. They could say, oh, we accept that idea that they're lonely and need more care. But they could have done like what closing did. They could say, but we think nursing homes give them better care and give them more social opportunity than living with a family. So they can choose. They can choose a strategy. Opening government, they have no choice. They have to show everything, their whole idea right at the beginning, and then they have to stick to it, even if they make a mistake. But opening opposition can sort of choose what part of the government case it wants to defeat. So I think that's a big advantage, actually. And closing has to follow opening, right? Closing really has no choice. They have to agree with you. So even if they don't like your strategy, they have to agree. If you guys, in closing, if you try to defeat your own opening side, that means like the other side just becomes much stronger, right? It kills both of you. It's like, mutual kill here, so these two teams are first and second. Or likewise, if they try to kill them, then, mutual kill here, so these two teams are the only ones that survive, right? So you don't want that to happen. So you get more choice. Actually, they have the most choice in the debate about where they want to go. They can just go, you can go with what you planned, Or if they surprise you, but you think that they gave you a weaker case than you expected, then you can find an easier way to defeat them and go with that way. So every team has some advantages and disadvantages in the debate. And you have to be aware of that in your preparation. Right. OG, lack of time. OO, no time to guess what opening government will say. Closing half, no idea what arguments the opening teams will make. So you don't know how to extend. Special advantages, OG, chance to surprise people with your choice that you're going to debate about this that they didn't expect. OO, listen to OG, is like extra prep time and then choose your attack. OO and CG in the center of the debate where you get to engage directly with teams, both teams on the other side. Closing half, most time to prepare. Because you can prepare while opening half is talking. You can keep preparing. Okay. So in preparation time, if you're in the opening half, here are some tips. First tip, let's read. Ready? Yeah. Go.
Think about the real world cases.
Right. Does half your work for you. So if you think about a real situation related to the motion, that helps you. So for example, this House supports the right of people to own guns. Where is a real case that supports that? US. Where's another country that supports the right of individuals to own guns? Only the US? Finland. Any other countries? Switzerland. Any other countries? Canada. Israel. Germany. Germany, really? Okay. I didn't know Germany. Pakistan. Afghanistan. Okay, so you think, real world cases. Which case will help me best? I like Canada, personally. Switzerland is pretty good, too. Finland, I didn't know either, but Finland is probably pretty good, too. Are there a lot of murders in Finland or Canada? No, not really, right? But people have the freedom to own guns. It's their right. It's part of their pride. They have this idea that, you know, we were a country that was started because people would like go into the woods and hunt and like discover new places. So, you know, there's like cultural reasons. Those examples also prove that maybe there's some way if you have guns, you can still control the danger of guns, possibly, right? So if you think about the real world case, what do they do? How do they do it? Why do they do it? That can help you make your arguments better. Maybe if you think Japan, you think, oh, nothing can help me. I'm government. This house supports the right to own guns. I'll lose. Oh no. So then don't set the motion in Japan. Set the motion in Canada or set the motion in Europe or something. You know, Switzerland, in fact, in Switzerland, every man is required to own a gun. Required. And they're also required to have ammunition because their whole male population is part of their army reserve force. Not that Switzerland ever fights. I don't understand why they need that. But anyway, Switzerland never fights a war, right? They're always a peaceful country. But every member of the Switzerland male person has to have a gun, has to have ammunition. But ammunition, bullets, right? The bullets are sealed by the government with a stamp, and they inspect. And if you have, like, if it's missing or if your bullets are missing, then that's a crime. So you have to make sure that you're very careful about who can use the gun and that nobody uses it for any bad reason. So that's one model, that like people should have military training and that they should have guns to help defend the country, but there should be very careful control. Switzerland model. Or you could say Canada model. Canada and the US, why are they different? Well, Canada has guns, but they also have much more control on gun sales. You can't just have a gun show and like sell a gun to anybody who walks up the same day, right? You have to apply, you have to register. Also, Canada has good social services. So poor people don't have to like rob money in order to go to the hospital or pay their medical bill or something like that. So Canada has much better social services than the United States. So similar culture, but gun culture in some aspects are different. So if you think about a real world case, it can really help you make your argument more strongly. Of course, some countries have, like US, yes, they have a right to own guns, but most countries would say we don't want to be like the US. It's bad. So, depending, maybe if the government doesn't say Canada or whatever, if the government says Japan, if you're opposition, you can also think of a real world case too. You can think, well, maybe Japan would be like the US, or maybe not. Maybe it would be like Canada. I don't know. That could be argued. So, okay, anyway, real world cases, especially if you're in opening half. Think of real world cases because that will help you make your arguments for government or for opposition. Second, start with a strong principle to center your case. OO especially. You can... Right. So rebuttal is good, but you don't want to over-rebut. You want to also have your own argument. So if you're OO, you might be surprised, right? You might be surprised by OG. Maybe they do say, we think everyone should have a right to own guns based on the Switzerland model, where they have a right to own guns, but they also have to be responsible for every bullet and have regular inspection and have careful training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, we didn't think of that. Uh-oh, what do we do, right? Well, you can think of some principles. So, anybody who can think of a principle why people should not have a right to own guns, even Switzerland, why should Swiss people not have a right to own guns? Why should Canadian people not have a right to own guns? Any principles that you can think of? Self-defense. Principle of self-defense. That sounds like a principle for a government team. But that's a good principle. Both teams should think of principles, for sure. Principles are good. So, this house believes everyone has the right to own a gun. Principle, self-defense. Okay, what's a principle that goes against that? If North Korea decides they want to attack Japan, does the Japanese government think that the principle of self-defense, every Japanese citizen should defend themselves? Is that the principle the government would work on? Not really, right? What's the opposite to self-defense principle? Yes, Geichi.
Except high-quality guns, such as bazooka.
Oh, well, right. Okay, right. So, well, that's part of the idea. Okay, that's an example. It's not a principle, but think about his example. Real-world examples, always useful. So, everyone has the right to own a gun. Do they have a right to own a bazooka? Do they have a right to own a cannon? A nuclear missile, yes, every home should have a nuclear missile in its bathroom. And if your neighbor plays really loud music and it bothers you, you launch the missile. Yeah? Okay, what's the principle here? It sounds ridiculous, right? But there's a principle behind that. Why shouldn't you have a bazooka? Why not? Why not a machine gun? Why not a cannon, a missile? Why not? Because?
Guns are used to harm other people or kill other people.
Okay. Well, just generally, okay, you could just go on the principle of harm. Like, you could say guns have no useful value. Other than killing. And killing is not usually a useful value. The thing I was thinking of, though, what about self-defense? That could be a useful value. But generally, who is responsible for defense of people? In countries like Japan, in countries like Korea, the government, right? Government, they call this government monopoly on use of force. Right? Basically the idea that the government is responsible for defense. So, if you give everybody a gun, even like Switzerland, that means that actually it's weakening the government's commitment to defense. It's weakening the government's responsibility to have a strong defense. And you can also argue that it will then give too much power to people. So what about countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan? One problem is that people don't think the government should have a monopoly, so they fight like wars with their neighboring people in the same country, right? It's chaos. Or Iraq, you have people like exploding bombs and shooting, and there is no government monopoly on use of force or power, and that can be a problem. So in principle, you can say, even if maybe some countries manage to make some kind of peaceful compromise, that, okay, it works in Switzerland, yes, but it's not a good principle. We shouldn't try that in other countries. There are too many bad examples that in principle, we think this is a bad idea, even if it works in one place. And then you can argue, beyond that, you can also argue, well, why is Switzerland different than any other place, or something like that. So having a strong principle argument, even if it surprises you, government team surprises you, leader of opposition, the first opposition speaker can come up with the principle. In this case, we can have two principles. We can have like guns are actually their only purpose is to cause harm. Fundamentally, they're bad. Second, fundamentally, it's wrong for the government to give up its use of force, its monopoly. Government should be taking responsibility for defense. It shouldn't be pushing it onto the individual people. So even if their model might work in some rare cases, we think generally it's based on the wrong principles. And then that gives your team extra time. Your deputy can then be thinking of more specifically, really, why won't their example work? What cases would make it fail, like that? And you can be more specific in the second speech. So first speech for leader of opposition, just talk about the principles, even if it sounds a little bit abstract. It gives your team a good start. Okay? To some extent, I think that's what happened in this debate, although opening opposition in our debate was a little bit unclear about its focus, but they did come up with this principle of individuality, right? So that was good. Okay. Third tip for opening teams. Are you ready? Go. If rushed. Yeah. Okay? So usually you try to plan arguments where the first speaker has one argument or two arguments, and then the second speaker has one argument or two arguments, right? You heard that opening government was very clear in our sample debate. They had three arguments. One, like lacking of helpers. Two, problems of nursing facilities. Three, connections in the family. But suppose you're surprised. And suppose you don't have enough time. Just let the first speaker take all the points. Second speaker, you have extra time to think, right? You can come up with an extra point while the other team's talking. Or while your own first speaker is talking. If the prime minister takes all 3 points, or 2 points, maybe you only have 2 points. Prime minister does point 1, point 2. Deputy prime minister is sitting and thinking. So, okay, what else can I say? What did we not think of in our prep time because it was too short? And you can add another point. It's better if you plan it in advance, but it's not always possible. Opposition team was, again, a little bit vague. They said, what's the real problem? Why is the current system better? And how can we improve it? Which is, again, it's contradictory. And then harms and benefits. So opposition's third point, harms and benefits, is actually really vague. What harm? What benefit? What are you going to talk about? But you don't necessarily need to actually have all your points for first and second speaker ready right at the beginning. You can add some later. It's still okay. Okay, so preparation time for closing. This is the trick for closing teams. First one. Ready? Go. Right. All right, so list as many arguments as you can. Let's see if we can do this. We have already some arguments for about the right to own a gun, right? We have some principal arguments on both sides. How many more arguments can we list? So everybody, maybe you already have some arguments you came up with when you were doing your POI practice. But right now, with your partner or with your group, for this house supports, or this house believes everyone has the right to own a gun, or I forget exactly how I worded that motion before. For that same motion, think of as many arguments as you can. Try to get like 10 different arguments if you can. For government and for opposition, go. You have like 3 minutes to think of as many arguments. Just list them, as many as possible. And we'll make a list. So, op, gov, we'll start with self-defense. And for op, we'll start with harm of guns. And we'll start with government, responsibility, to protect. And we'll start with 2A, government, monopoly on force. And 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, 3 minutes. Everybody stop. I've got, in addition to those ones up there, I've got 6 more for government and 5 more for opposition myself. So let's see how you guys did, and let's see if we can cover them all. If there's anything you don't mention, I'll go back and look at my list and see if I've got it. All right, starting on government side, self-defense and what other arguments? Deterrence. Deter crime. Okay, and this is like a principle, a right to self-defense. This is a practical argument. Deters crime. They're related, right? That's okay. It can be related. It can be similar. But tell me anyway. What? More? Yes? Fairness. Good. I didn't even think of that one at all. Good argument. What else? Yes?
No way to collect all guns.
Okay. Practically no way to collect all guns now. Okay, good. Practically can't collect all the guns. Okay, good. More? Yes?
We feel safety by having guns.
Feel safe. Okay, good. I know someone who will disagree with you about that, but because in my group she mentioned that as a reason to oppose. But anyway, good. What else? Nothing? Come on, you must have some more for government. Yes?
Government cannot guarantee the protection of every single individual.
Okay. So on a practical level, like government, it's sort of similar to this, but I'm going to write it down anyway. Government can't always protect. Okay, anything else? I know there are more. Like I think these are all different from the ones that I meant, that I listed. Like they're all different. Mine are all different. This is crazy. Maybe it's because I was born in America. I don't know. Land of the gun. Okay. Culturally important. Right? People like guns. Pleasure. Sport. like hunting, etc. Hunting, target shooting. Okay, what else do I have? Support the gun industry. Jobs. What else? Allow resistance to dictators. Second Amendment in the USA. Right? The original reason why people were allowed to have guns is because they could use it to have a revolution against a bad king. Anything else? Right. I think that's pretty much it. Like some of them I combined. Like this one and this one were different. Like this one, like hunting and then like pleasure were different. Like I actually wrote hunting to survive. But anyway, right? So we have 10 arguments for government now. How about opposition? Harm of guns, government monopoly on force and responsibility to protect, other opposition arguments.
Children's accidents.
Okay, children's accidents. Good. Or accidents in general even, right? Adult accidents. Like, who's that South African runner? Oscar Pistorius, right? He claims like he shot his girlfriend by accident because he thought she was a burglar. It happens a lot, actually, yeah. What else? Other reasons to oppose. Okay, you feel, right. Feel safe? No, opposition team is going to clash directly. I'm glad you mentioned that as number 5. It's just the right place. I think, Honami, is that your name? No. Hinako? Sorry? Hinako? Yeah, Hinako, you mentioned that, right? People do not feel safe. They feel danger with guns around them all the time, yes? Yes, you did that when you were doing your speech in POIs. Yeah, why didn't you say now? Feel dangerous. Okay, good. What else? More arguments.
The possibility of exporting.
Oh, can be exported. Exploded or exported? Exported, right. To like bad places, right? Like US guns going to Mexico. Mexico has a huge gun problem. Most of the guns are manufactured in the US and transported illegally. Good. That is one of my reasons I have listed. What else? Nothing more, really? I think I must have some other ones, although some of yours are similar. Similar to can be exported, but can be taken by criminals. Right? They say sometimes, like, if you have a gun and try to use it in self-defense, there's more of a chance the criminal will just take it and shoot you with it. What else? Oh, yeah. Gun accidents. This one is sort of a stupid argument, but it's about the hunting. It's supposed to clash with the hunting argument. So less animal cruelty. Because no hunting. Right? Some of these are not good arguments, but they're ideas anyway. Their arguments are ideas. 9 and 10, okay, maybe we don't have a 9 and a 10. I think this is about all I have on my list. But this is what you should do when you're a closing half team. Just like brainstorm. What are all the possibilities? Think of crazy stuff too. Maybe it's not as crazy as you think. Maybe later you'll think of a really good connection. So if you get a long list like this, surely government opening half team cannot cover 10 arguments. It's impossible. If they cover 10, they won't say anything about them. They'll just be saying empty words, so you'll have a chance to use it anyway. It's fine. Okay. Second. Try. Okay, so we already have right at the top, we have a clash between self-defense versus government responsibility to protect. That's going to be a key clash. Any other good clashes? Feel safe versus feel dangerous. That's a clash. Any other clashes you see here? Exactly. These it's 6 and 7. Exported to places where there's a lot of violence or taken by criminals or stolen, right. So do more guns actually deter crime, or do they help criminals have an easier time getting guns, right? Anything else? Those are, yeah? Okay, right. That's sort of a clash too. But this is just such a bad argument. It's not, that's the other thing. Even if you are opening half team, try and think of several arguments and then choose the best ones. Opening half team, that's part of your advantage. You can choose the best arguments and try to take them yourself. Closing half team, you can think and see if there's something that opening half totally missed, you can fill it in and really claim the debate like that. So yeah, some of these other things aren't really clashes, they just are things that people have to rebut. So for example, culturally important. There's nothing specifically to clash with that, but that's just something opposition will have to rebut if that comes in as an argument. Okay, right. So of course, this one we all know, but let's read it anyway. Ready? Go. Exactly. So as you hear opening half, keep preparing, keep thinking of new arguments. If opening half mentions something but they don't explain it, you can steal that from them. It's sort of the way if you mention something in a POI and they can then take that and turn it into a whole argument, they can steal it from you. But if opening half just says it but they don't explain it, you can then, but if you think it's important, then you can actually explain it and you get credit for doing all the explanation. So that's one way. And finally, a couple other things. First,
choose the key principle to bring into
right, connected and relevant. So for example, suppose the right to self-defense. Suppose opening government talks a lot about how government can't always protect people and how it can deter crime, but they don't actually talk about it as a right. Closing government can talk about it as a right, and then also talk about, say, how allow resistance to dictators is an extreme example, but that's the whole reason why the US has the Second Amendment, why it's written into the Constitution as a right, because actually, finally, at least in the US Constitution, it does say that self-defense, including defense from your government, is finally the right of the people. It's the right of every individual. It's not something your government can claim. So if opening half talks more about practical reasons, closing half can talk about principle, link that to an extension about overthrowing dictators, maybe even link it to the cultural point and say why, this is also why in many countries, if they have a culture of guns, it's not something they want to give up, because it's not just empty culture. It's not like I can give up guns and then I can start, listening to K-pop music instead as a new hobby. Guns actually have a really important central part in the culture. You can't just replace it easily with something else. So if you can link everything to one principle, that can make your argument stronger also. And finally, organize and prioritize clashes. So this is what neither team in closing successfully did in our sample debate, but try and make the clash that you make most important the one that you are winning for your team. If it's a practical clash, make that one the most important. Spend most of your time talking about it. If it's a principle, make that one the most important. Spend most of your time talking about that one. Okay, so I see several people nodding off to sleep. We have 1 more hour. But I want to take a short break so everyone can go to the bathroom, get a drink, get some coffee, something. Because with 3 or 4 people nodding off, I think I'd be wasting my time talking too much, right? 10 minutes. Be back here at 4:15. I'll skip many things on the slides, but on your handout you have many of the things I skip, so it's okay. you can look. All right, last part, how to win in each position. So we already talked about general things, opening half, closing half, and so on. This part about each special team. But most of this I'm going to skip, actually. I'm going to just go through a few more general tips. So general tips number 1. All together, let's go. Go. Opening half. Turf burning or scorched earth. That's what people call it. Scorched earth is like in a war. If your side is losing, you retreat, but the land you leave behind, you burn everything. So the other army can't have any food to eat or any support, right? Scorched earth or turf burning, they call it. But in debate, it means you take all the good arguments, you leave nothing for the other team, for the closing half team. Second, closing half. Right. So these two things are sort of the opposite. If the first half can claim all the good arguments, the second half has no good extension. But if the first half misses something, the second half can make that the main part of the debate. And then first half is finished. They can't say, no, stop talking about that. Talk about our point. Right? Second half can focus on their point, and that can help them win. Third tip.
If there's one awesome team, engage, take their
Right. So, for example, if your team is closing government, suppose you think that the best team in the whole debate is opening opposition. That means spend a lot of your time talking to them. Yes, you have to spend some time talking to them also, but if you think, they're weak, we can beat them anyway. Spend a little time talking to them, take lots of POIs, take maybe, some people said, who said, was it you, Nene? Three POIs? Or Hanai, 3, anyway. Maybe you should take 3 POIs, so you can take 2 from this team and 1 from that team, and you can show that you can beat them. Talk about their arguments, spend some extra time rebutting them. When you organize in the whip speech, clash 1. It's going to be a clash between you and them, and show why you won. So if there's one awesome team, even if you don't think you can beat them, even if you think the judge will disagree, we didn't actually beat them, but spend a lot of time engaging with them to show that you are at least trying to beat the best team in the debate. If the best team is your own opening team, well, support them strongly and totally destroy these 2 other teams, right? Okay, anyway. And finally, everyone. POI a lot. Make sure that the judges know that you can't be ignored, that your team has something to say. General tips 2 on POIs. For OG and OO. Force the closing half to engage. Even if, like suppose, closing government, suppose you're opening opposition, but closing government is not engaging. They're spending all their time talking with closing opposition. Well, you have to POI them, or try to anyway, make them engage. Or make it very obvious to the judges that they're trying to dodge, that they're afraid of you. So, okay. Second. Right. Same point, really. And third, discipline yourself. Doesn't refute all those arguments. So in our debate, if you're opening government, probably the POI you should be asking is, but what about the idea of families understanding old people better? What about the idea of the children understanding old people? We still didn't hear an answer to that point. Finally, I think closing opposition did say something about it, that people change, right? So even if they grew up together and you were their father, when you're really old, maybe you're different. But I think that's a weak answer, to be honest. So I think if you're opening opposition, you want to keep asking, what about the idea of independence? Why isn't that important in our society? Because that's their best point. So closing government is talking a lot about the family and virtue of the family. Opening opposition should be saying, well, great, families are wonderful, we agree, but what about independence? You haven't said a single thing about our idea of independence, right? They should be trying to emphasize their most important point. So instead of just trying to rebut the other team, try and emphasize your own strong, positive contribution. Always be positive. General tips 3 on extensions. This is Minjung's special request, and she's not even here. Oh, she is there. Okay. Good. Minjung, this is for you. Common ways to extend. First one. Go. Everybody, read. Practical details to principles and/or symbolic impact. Sends a message of, right? Closing government tried to do that. It tried to change the focus from practical to the message of the family, the virtues of the family. So they were a little too abstract. Just because it's a principle, it doesn't mean you should be abstract. You should be very specific about why that principle is important. But still, practical details. The first half was mostly about practical details, especially on government side. Second half can extend to more principle arguments. Or backwards. Principles to practical impact. So that's sort of what happened on opposition side. Principle of independence. There was also a lot of practical stuff from opening half. Closing half, then, they started talking about practically in the institution or in the facility for old people. What happens there? Why is it a good thing? So sort of that's what happened. Okay, third one. General case to specific stakeholders. Children, poor people, etc. So that didn't happen in this debate, but you could do that. Okay, maybe this model of incentivizing families to take care of their older parents, maybe it works for middle class people who have big houses. They can have an extra room for their grandparents to stay there. But what about really poor people who are living in a rented house that's already too small? If you give them 30,000 yen a month, it's not going to help them. It's just going to make more of a burden. They're going to have to share their bedroom. The children won't have their own private space. This is going to be really bad for them. What about really rich people? 30,000 yen isn't going to incentivize them to do anything. They're just going to let right? So that's one way of extending. You can very specifically point out specific groups or cases where the original arguments don't work. Okay. Fourth, local case to international impact. In our sample debate, totally not relevant. It's just about Japan. I think not relevant. Maybe I'm wrong, actually. I didn't think about it in detail. But in some debates, like allowing people to have guns, one of the points that Shiro mentioned, exporting those guns to places where they can be used in violence and in war and to destabilize the world, right? That's an international impact. So in the first half of this debate, if everybody was just talking about in the country, for opposition, this could be a good extension. Okay, the US, fine, they can have the right to have guns. If it's just the US, maybe that's okay, but it's not just the US. The US has a huge impact on the whole world. We're going to talk about Mexico, where there are illegal arms sales as our extension, and then we're also going to talk about legal arms sales and the way that the US government pushing the arms industry is causing problems all around the world in conflict zones. Actually, quite a powerful extension, it could be. Okay. To long-term impact. So there, I can't think of a quick example, but I guess probably what closing government was trying to do in the sample debate about virtues of the family, that's sort of more like a long-term idea of how do we change society's feelings and thoughts. And finally, shift political, economic, societal frameworks. So in this case, it was mostly societal, about like old people and their families. But maybe you could shift to economic. There was a little bit of an economic argument. There was about it's better if they have their own jobs and they can earn their own money and they can contribute to the economy. This side didn't really rebut that point. It wasn't a major clash, but there was a little bit coming from opening up about economic framework. So if the opening half just talks about societal or just talks about political or something, you can also shift in closing half to talk about something else. So it's good to just keep these general ideas in mind for how to extend in a debate, like different ways to do it. Okay, I'm going to skip all this stuff. This is all about opening government. It's all in your notes. If you want to read it, you can use it like to debate about in your own club. You can talk about what does this mean? Why did Peter put it on a slide? You can send me email if you want to really ask me. There are some exercises. We're going to skip by this. Ways to beat the other teams. Maybe I'll spend a little time on this, but we already talked about this, how each team can beat the other teams. I'm going to skip it. There's no time, really, right? Almost time to end the lecture. So it's all in your notes. Opening opposition, summary of what they should do, leader of opposition, deputy leader of opposition, exercise. How do you beat the opening government? How do you beat the closing government? How do you beat the closing opposition, right? POIs, we already did that at the beginning. How to win in each position, closing half. Closing half, member of government, government whip. Then actually I added this. Oh, reminder about extensions, exercise on extensions. I added this. These are on my slides, but not on your handout. How do you beat the opening government? How do you beat the opening op? How do you beat the closing op? If you want, like, just send me an email. I'll send you the updated slides with the extra stuff on it if you want. But we talked about it in general already. So, and finally, closing opposition. So, yeah, I got a few minutes. So, closing opposition in a nutshell. Let's just read this together. Are you ready? Okay, go. Member of opposition, extension speaker. Sometimes they actually say that. Like instead of saying, I now call the member of opposition to give his speech, sometimes we now call the extension speaker. So first, provide your team's vision for the debate, the extension. Second, opening half. And third, provide argumentation. Explain your extension. I think it's good right at the beginning of your speech to tell everybody, what's your extension? How does it connect to the rest of the debate? And then after that, then provide all your argumentation, your rebuttals, your positive arguments, everything. Opposition whip, first. Clarify your team's vision. Second. And third, summarize clashes with an emphasis on your team's contribution. Okay. So more specifically, MO. First, clarify what the debate is really about. Explain why your extension is important. Second, differentiate your team from the OO. The unique contribution of the CO to this debate is... ... You'll hear speakers say that sometimes. And finally, prioritize your rebuttals. Right. So you don't have time to rebut everything. It's very important to be positive as the extension speaker. Be positive about your contribution. Yes, you rebut. But only rebut the big points, the little things that don't matter or that weren't really explained in much detail. You can just ignore them pretty much. Okay. Ooh. Opposition. Oh, MO speech structure then. First, summarize the debate, including the opening half and the closing government's extension. Give your extension. Rebut the OG and the MG by weighing clashes if possible. Elaborate arguments in support of your extension. And brief conclusion, restate your stance, restate your extension. So, okay, since we're out of time, I have the same things for opposition whip, what opposition whip should do. And then last thing we're going to do here is clashes. So another important things for closing half, extensions and clashes. And both of those things were things that made the closing half weaker in our sample demonstration debate today. They didn't really have clear enough or strong enough extensions. They didn't really have clear enough organization and prioritization of clashes. So this is pretty important for being a closing half team. All right, let's read. Ready? Go. Finding clash can be similar to finding an extension. Almost every debate can be divided into clashes on a principle level and clashes on a practical level. Analyzing impacts on stakeholders is another method of organizing the clashes in the debate. Okay, and then it says down here, first, look back at the example debate on affirmative action shown on the next slide. So this example I skipped at the beginning, but it's on the next slide again, so I'll show it to you again. And first, what are the principal and practical clashes? Second, how about the stakeholders in the debate? Who are they? All right, here's the slide. Let's read through. Motion. This House would base affirmative action on socioeconomic status, not race or religion. Okay, we need to define. So what's affirmative action? Affirmative action equals special rights or benefits for a minority group. Okay, minority is also something that's a little bit of an unclear term sometimes. So in Japan, are there any minority groups? Yes, what are they? What are they? Minority groups in Japan. Ainu, okay, they're minority. Old Japanese, or people living in the Japanese area before the Japanese who are here now, right? Any other minorities? We talked about one in one of our exercises.
Not only Japan, but also other country, LGBT people.
Okay, lesbian, gay, bisexuals, right? That's a minority, a social minority, good. Foreign workers. Yeah? That's a minority. How about women? In number, there may be majority, slightly, 50.5% or something, right? But how about in power? Minority, right? So minority can actually be very broad definition. How about poor people? Minority, right? Again, it's not any so there are many ways to think about minority. But some kind of special affirmative action. In Korea, we have affirmative action for poor people, people from small country towns, farming towns, or fishing towns. They get easy extra admission into university. Do you have that in Japan too? Special admission into university for people from a very small farming or fishing village. Yes? No? Nothing. Do you have any special affirmative action policy in Japan for anybody?
Disabled people, company should employ disabled.
Okay, that's an example then. Companies, say it loudly.
Company have to employ disabled people.
Disabled people, like physically disabled people who are in a wheelchair or blind or something like that, right? Okay, so that's an example of affirmative action for a minority. Okay, so what does this motion say? this House would base affirmative action on socioeconomic status, not race or religion. So not for Ainu, not for foreign workers, but not for disabled people even, but for socioeconomic, for poor people only. That's what the motion is saying. Only have affirmative action for poor people. Okay. This is what opening government did in the debate. So we start off with the background and the definition. Let's read together. Are you ready? Go. Sets the case in the USA and focuses on race-based affirmative action programs. So race. In the US, what's the most common racial minority you think about? Black people, African Americans, exactly. So there's special policies, right, for admission into university or for maybe getting a job or something like that if you're African American in some places. So opening government says that's what we're going to talk about. We think no more programs for black people or Asian people or anything like that. Just only for poor people. 1, reason is because not needed anymore. Discrimination problem is solving itself. And 2, like we have Barack Obama, black president, right? So discrimination is disappearing. 2nd, poor minorities get helped better under our model. So actually probably a better label, more effective use of money, more efficient. Because if we change from race to economics as a reason, then the money goes to people who really need it. Just because you're black, maybe you're a rich black person. Maybe you don't need extra help, right? So this way is more efficient. Those are opening government arguments. Opening opposition arguments. First. Yeah, okay, so USA, race, or economics, that's fine. USA has black people, USA has poor people. Their explanation of the situation is okay. But, first, needed. There is still inequality in status quo, in the situation now. SQ means situation now, status quo. So they disagree, actually, with part of the setting, in some sense. And second, race-based affirmative action is not mutually exclusive with welfare for poor people. We should do both. So yes, you should help poor people, we agree, but you can do both things together because you should do both. So that's their arguments in opening up. Okay, let's go to closing then. Closing government. First, summarizes the debate, supports OG, and rebuts OO. Extension. Effects on white majority. First, race-based affirmative action is unfair. White people think it's unfair. They feel discrimination, reverse discrimination, they call it. And white backlash hurts minorities. Backlash means white people get angry. They feel it is unfair. Therefore, they discriminate more. Therefore, they do things, maybe they don't want to discriminate, but they feel if they're hurting me, I should hurt them back, right? So those are extensions from closing government. Different from these arguments, right? This is focusing on black people and poor people. This is focusing on white people. So it's an extension. It's a different stakeholder in the situation. Closing opposition. Summarizes debate, supports opening opposition, and rebuts opening government and closing government. Extensions. First, justice and fairness. Reparations for past harm, pain of continued stereotypes. So they are saying, no, that this is fair. Affirmative action for black people is fair because past harm. Black people used to be slaves. White people still owe them. Reparation, that's what it means. It means payment for something in the past. If my grandfather was a slave, you should pay me for making my grandfather a slave, even if it was my grandfather in the past. It's still a crime. You owe me reparations. And then pain of continued stereotypes. There are still stereotypes. So mental pain Even if. Okay, and second, benefits of diversity. Positive thing. If we have race-based affirmative action, we have more diverse groups. So it's good. Even if we don't need it, it's still good to have it, right? Those are the extensions for closing opposition. All right, so this chart, this debate chart, is on your first page. Oh, it's also on your last page. Okay, it's there too. So you have it in both places. All right, anyway, our last activity before we take a break is with your partner, try and find the clashes. What are the clashes? And also think about who are the stakeholders, because that's a different way of organizing. All right, go. There's actually another slide that gives answers, but don't look at that one. Look at the first page, not the last page. Okay, everybody stop. So, actually on the slide, on your handout, this is what I think are the clashes. Principal clashes, fairness. Is it fair or not fair? Who is it fair to, right? Value of diversity. Is diversity important or not important? Second, practical clashes. First, do we need the policy? Is it necessary or not necessary? Second, efficiency. Who is helped or not helped better? Third, danger of backlash. Is there a danger or not a danger? And finally, stakeholders. Racial minorities, white people, poor people. 3 groups that are affected by the policy, right? So going back, going back to look, you can see in the opening half, what's the first clash that comes into this debate? First clash is about, do we need any policy anymore? Second clash, efficiency. Efficiency. Does the policy help poor people or minorities better if we get rid of race-based, or does it help them better if we keep race-based together with economic-based as 2 separate policies? So there are 2 clear clashes. They clash very strongly. How about in the second half? What are the clashes? Fairness, exactly. Fairness. Is it fair or unfair? What about to the white people? What about to people who suffered past harm? What's more fair? Any other clashes here? Practical clashes. They're not really clashes, but they're new points. This one has a practical point about backlash. This one has a practical point about diversity. So these are points the other team should rebut. But they're not exactly clashes, but they could be clashes. So as a whip speaker, at the end of the debate, you can organize your speech like this, principles and practical classes, or you could organize your speech like this, stakeholders. Maybe government whip organizes like that, so opposition whip wants to do something different, organizes like this. But really, the way you organize should be based on your own extension, like what you brought into the debate. So in this case, government whip, what's the most important point out of these points for government? Government, closing government. What's the most important point? Closing government's backlash? Maybe. I would say probably fairness is a little more important, though. Usually principles are more important than practical points. But if you were closing government in this debate, probably this should be the same, 1, 2. But then in this one, you should talk about this one first. And these 2, you should just maybe, if you have extra time, mention them, but even ignore them. Because these are more important, and then this one is your point, so you should definitely talk about this. Number 2, number 3. Right? You should reorganize a little bit based on your own team's stronger arguments. How about if you're closing opposition? Most important point is also fairness. And then second most important point is probably diversity. So in fact, closing opposition could even stop right here. They could put everything under the two principal clashes, including the practical points. They could just put them under the principles. Or they could do it like this, or they could do it like this. For closing opposition, I think any one of them could possibly work. So those are strategic decisions you have to make. But the general principle is always emphasize what your team is doing in the debate. Every team should do that, right? I think that's almost the end. Do I have one more slide before the end? Final tips. One more slide. Let's read them. Are you ready? Go. Fortune favors the bold. No matter what else happens, always stay active in the debate. Even if you think you're losing, just try your best. Second, though strategy is important, in other words, come up there and say something meaningful to your audience. Even if you think it's bad strategy or whatever, go ahead. Whatever is most important in your mind, say that. Especially if you're a beginner. If you're a beginner, you're never going to have perfect strategy. Like you don't have time in the debate to really plan your strategy perfectly. If you're very experienced, maybe you have enough experience, you've debated like this same debate or a similar debate so many times you can have a perfect strategy. But as a beginner, your strategy is never going to be perfect. So if you have one important thing to say, just say it first. Always say something important. Don't worry about trying to organize too much. Finally, not quite finally, but almost finally, even when she or he messes up, do not blame your partner. Oh, your bad speech made us lose this debate. Never. Always support your partner. Say, oh, you tried really hard. Thank you so much for helping me. And last, have fun. Okay, that's the end.